Sup everybody, this is Karak with ACG, and as always it's my continuing mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. Today it's time we leap into the Wayback Machine and visit a world that Quaid and Total Recall made cool. That world is Mars, and that game is Red Faction Guerrilla Re-Mars-tered, which, yes, might actually be the world's worst name for a game, but it's also a treatise on the color of the planet that you're going to be exploring. It's time to get your ass to Mars as Alec Mason, and the story of his slow descent into the Earth-Mars war for resources, as well as climbing up the ranks of the guerrilla hierarchy. And of course, as we all know, the best way to get in touch with aspiring minds and hearts is to smash the hell out of everything, and that's pretty much all you do here. Built on the custom destruction engine known as GeoMod, every structure can be leveled to the ground, and pretty much every one of them should be. And to do this, you're doled out a bevy of destruction-heavy weapons to take the battle to the EDF, or the Earth Defense Force. So strap on in, because it's time to Kool-Aid Man your way through an entire landscape, and you can do it this Tuesday for the price of free if you own the original Steam version of the game, or $30 if you don't. And it'll be out on the PS4, Xbox, and of course the PC. As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for Red Faction Guerilla Re-Mars-tered, restoring native lands to their original splendor, homicidal AI, and giving a new meaning to the term, I'm gonna smash that. Graphics are up first. So the remaster is a really odd bird, one part amazing but ancient destruction engine, one part shored up improvements from a game that originally wasn't the most varied in the first place, and you have a title that has one foot planted solidly in over-the-top amazing looking destruction, and the other so far in the past if someone took a picture of it, it'd still have that new baby tag from a hospital wrapped around its ankle. For example, graphically, you do get native 4K, some nicer shaders, some post-processing, as well as a noticeable increase in the shadowing system than the original, and yes, it is considered to be completely reworked, as they say. But rework doesn't mean good work, otherwise failure would just be everyone's first try, and second tries would always be successful, and they aren't. One place we see that here, sadly, is the landscape. It isn't really shored up much at all, and this results in a mixed bag the longer you play the game. Even the effects for the crumbling buildings aren't really improved to a high degree, and during destruction, there's a bevy of improvements that could have been made with the particle systems and the destruction systems themselves that weren't, resulting in giant blocky structures breaking around you that instantly show their age, or the egregious popping that occurs throughout the world. And that's one thing if a world's highly detailed, but Mars, at least in this game, is a series of turd-colored hills spreading off somewhat into the distance that's drawn in front of you as if the engine keeps forgetting its place every few seconds. Now that being said, it is impossible to deny that the GeoMod system itself was way ahead of its time, and many of the fans of the original probably looked at the much maligned Crackdown 3's overpromised destruction system and thought to themselves, man, this is going to be my jam. And it's easy to see why. Everything's destructible, and unlike some games where if you get a car stuck between a building and an impassable mountain, here, you just plow right through the son of a bitch, put the pedal to the metal, and you're gone, and it absolutely excels at those points. Like when you jet out the side of a refinery in your six-wheel digger, and you're still carrying half the damn facility on the back of the car, debris flying off you, you pull a Wiiu, and basically head right back in there. Or the first time you get enemies to retreat inside a building you've already weakened, and the fools think that safety is in numbers, where you just pretty much know it just means it's going to be easier to kill them all. You evaporate that last support, and the building crumbles on top of them. Those are moments when it really does elevate above a lot of games in this genre. I also love the weapon effects overall. Even the guns, they throw off a nice amount of particle effects. But for me, the highlight has to be the electrical welding gun that spits out bolts of lightning all around you, chaining from enemy to enemy, both absolutely devastating them pretty quickly, but also changing your tactics once you get it. In fact, rarely does a system built into any game change your patterns and your strategies as much as the GeoMod system did when it was out and does here. It's a celebration of absolute destruction, and it never is just for visual sake. It really will change how you go about taking on the enemies, and blowing up a column of enemy tanks can choke the bad guy's ability to even get to you. All of that is incredibly well done. Of course, all this wouldn't matter if the performance wasn't up to snuff, and it actually is. When it comes to performance on the PC, 4K is easy enough to hit on a 1080 with a current i7 or AMD chip, and there's really no very noticeable frame drops other than a couple times when heavy enemy spawns show up and their sympathetic explosions can end up sending them skyward. That will sometimes show you a couple frame drops. When it comes to the basic consoles, you have 60 FPS modes only with 900p resolution on the Xbox One and 1080p on the PS4. Interestingly, on the Pro and the Xbox consoles, you have two modes, 30 and 60, with the PS4 Pro at 1500p at 60 FPS and the Xbox X at 1800p at 60 FPS, while both can lock at 30 FPS in 4K mode. Here we really do see that 60 FPS mode is the way to go, especially with the slightly floaty feeling of everything in the game. The upscaling's robust enough that the trade-off for half that frame rate is really not needed. Overall, it's always nice to have options, but I can't figure most people will choose to go that 30 FPS route, but you may. Overall, I have to say, I like the idea of this remaster, but much of it that could have been improved is still based in the past, and the fact that the engines and the adjustments that have been made don't really elevate it above, say, an Xbox X's enhanced title that is actually totally free is a little bit disappointing. I would have liked to have seen far more work, especially when it comes to pop-in, sound, music, and voice.
Fun ride?
Yeah, a blast.
How's Mom?
She misses you.
Sorry I missed Dad's funeral. Things here have been hard.
No one expected you to come halfway across the system.
And let's do music first. It's not great. For the most part, it's ambient battle music with a nice section of percussion to hammer home that important shit that is occurring. There is some ambient synths here and there, especially in the middle and later cutscenes. They're pretty good, but overall, I would say the music is not really that impactful. Voice. This is not terrible, but it's also not great. Ignoring the story for a bit, Troy Baker plays Alec Mason and does a fairly good job, but especially here, and because it's so long ago, Troy didn't have much other than his own voice to really go on, and it's hard not to instantly notice it's him playing that character. When it comes to the other denizens of the Red Planet's wastes, as folks go, they're pretty good. You meet them, join them, or kill them as you go through the game, and overall their narratives are delivered fairly one note, but overall not particularly bad. Sound. So this is acceptable, but there's a couple problems. First, well, it's got a nice sample of sounds, and all the guns do sound at least somewhat impactful. For many of them, there's even a nice heavy end to the tail-off, especially in the turret weapons on the back of vehicles. Strangely, though, the distance fade-off is dramatically strong here, so an explosion from, let's say, a remote detonated mine doesn't carry half as far as it actually should. In busy battles, this can result in some heavy amounts of thick sounds all really overlapping one another, and it never quite feels impactful of all those separate events getting partitioned off to the player accurately. Environmentally, there isn't much going on here. There's some wind and some different sounds of things being smashed or crushed around you, the whine of machinery, but it's not really something to write home about. Also, when it comes to the positional audio, depending on which system I was playing it on, it was either okay or not really that great at times, especially when buildings are smashing around you and enemies are spawning behind you. The game doesn't really separate itself incredibly well, and that wide channel that you want so that you can tell left from right behind you doesn't really have the strong processing effects that you would sort of hope for in this. It wasn't terrible, and it did save me a couple times, but overall, it wasn't that noticeable. I would have liked to have had that improved. There are multiple audio layers you can adjust in the audio system, so I would suggest you go in there if you have a problem. Gameplay, and a bit about the story. You play as Alec Mason, newcomer to Mars, to hang with your brother and pretty much do some work. Since looking at Mars, you can tell right away it's not exactly a happening place. Within moments of the game starting, Alex does the one thing he says he won't do, which is become a terrorist. No lie, he literally says, "I am not a terrorist," and then boom, he's not only a terrorist, but apparently he's the only one in the guerrilla fighting force that can lead charges, take missions, defend themselves from anything more dangerous than a friggin' frozen pudding pop or shoot in a straight line. So it's up to him to save the day. Now, to free Mars, you perform missions for the local guerrilla group, which usually means traipsing around Mars, with most of your missions falling into 3 categories despite attempts to prove otherwise. Those missions are basically side missions where you help other characters destroy EDF facilities yourself, or run around in the story mission also destroying EDF facilities. And there's a reason why that is, because this friggin' game hinges on destruction like a goddamn Warhammer 40,000 Chaos God. It starts with the locations. Whoever first made a colony on Mars apparently decided that the best bet for safety was to build a bunch of facilities with the structural integrity of graham crackers and marshmallow glued together on a lukewarm afternoon, and then just tossed them haphazardly across the landscape. Luckily, Alec is that one asshole kid in the sandbox we all know that smashed everyone else's toys, and that means you're bringing the world to its knees with this destruction. Even for an old game and engine, The changing of your strategy mid-battle due to the destruction is profound. Just for one example, when smashing into buildings, you can use your sledgehammer, which has vertical and horizontal swipes, each taking different sections of a building out in different ways. If you need a door to get into a place where enemies are hiding, you just Kool-Aid man your way through the wall, smashing directly through it. Or use various explosive devices like grenade launchers, missile launchers, and remote detonated mines to take down the structure with the enemy still holed up inside. And that allows for the game to always feel dangerous. Nothing and nowhere is safe. You have the ability to crouch or cling to bits of the world to protect yourself, but everything's so crumble happy that nothing lasts longer than a couple seconds at most, meaning you and the enemies are consistently flanking, juking, and leaping out of the way of incoming fire. It works incredibly well in that manner. And that really is the main crux of the game. Sadly, that destruction comes at a price. Well, it actually comes at two prices. The first is the fact that apparently somehow Mars has way more people on it than Earth does, because the AI, unfortunately, infinitely respawns when you're in battle. So when you start taking out EDF bases, enemies absolutely cloud cover the locations. And I get it, back in that time, when this was originally created, that was a very typical gameplay conceit we saw in a lot of games. But understanding that even now, it really doesn't do Guerrilla any favors. Additionally, because you're just kicking the shit out of the entire world at all times, the enemies need to really be able to scoot around without getting caught on things. But that daredevil style comes at its own price, and that's the fact that a lot of times it just looks friggin' hilarious. Like the first time you start smashing solar panels like you were paid by oil execs, you'll be constantly seeing enemies in their military vehicles absolutely losing their shit in their attempt to get to you. In fact, many times you can see a military vehicle fly off a giant ravine to try to catch you and smash headlong into their own flying vehicles. It's just pure anarchy, and sadly, while it is funny for a bit, after a while it really starts to make things just look a bit clumsy, especially because as you're battling and doing better, you're going to start to collect guerrilla fighters who will stop what they're doing to come join you. And it's always nice to have a couple friends along to do some extra van damage. Sadly, none of them can stop a vehicle correctly. They drive the vehicle into the middle of the road, filling up the intersection like a goddamn blood clot, which then causes the reinforcing EDF fighters to panic even more. And the number of times Joe Bob, a helping hand fighter, is going to leap out of his truck to help you, with his truck parked firmly in front of you as you're driving full speed in your path, is uncountable. There is a reason why this title gets compared many times to the original Mercenaries games, and in some ways to the later sequel of that game, because both do share a bit of that low-rent GTA feeling. Doesn't mean it's not fun, it just means they can look a bit on the off or disorganized side. Luckily, as Alec, you're never without some weapons, up to 4, and there's a good variety of them, from the electric cooking crackle of arc welders to multi-launch rockets that can turn a sniper in a high position to a screaming dead man as you evaporate the floor beneath him, to heat-seeking missiles, high rate-of-fire machine guns, and a mixture of other guerrilla, EDF, and later Marauder weapons. As you do better in the game's assorted missions, you unlock plans for those weapons, and as you destroy any item in the game world, they drop bits of salvage, which is the game's main currency. Now, the inclusion of those cool destruction-dealing weapons does cause a bit of an issue later on, especially as ammo is fairly scarce, and couple that with the many missions requiring you to destroy multiple buildings in one location to free that location, plus the infinite enemies, and you can find yourself performing ammo runs, just driving away from the battle to go back to your hideout to grab some bullets so you can then go back. As long as you don't die, most of the building damage is going to be kept, so there is that. But it certainly feels a bit creaky. Now, while the shooting is fairly robust, there's no lie, it works pretty good with both gamepad and mouse and keyboard, I have to say the driving continues to feel as unresponsive as the original title did, and I was a big fan of that title. It's just not great, and much of that is due to the fact that Guerrilla outfits Mars with a substantially lower gravity than most gamers are going to be accustomed to, which can make both Alec and everything in the game world feel very floaty. In fact, floaty's pretty much an understatement. Imagine if the entire world was made of rubber bands and trampolines, and you get the idea. Luckily, since everything in the game world feels that way, even the enemies who are susceptible to it, it does allow for you to, let's say, control jumps and falls to a higher degree. All the multiplayer from the original title is here, and if you beat the game, you can also jump back in and continue any missions you left behind. And one of the great things is the multiplayer was so much fun originally, so that is definitely a boon to this title. As a package, I'd say Guerrilla feels a little odd. It's a remastered title where, while the graphics are indeed better, it's still really enamored in that ancient religion that many old games worship so strongly: infinite AI, and many times 1 to 2 features that are becoming their main expressive element. In this game, the game's destructive elements. They are excellent, but in all honesty, a lot of the other factors feel incredibly ancient in their overall design. And of course, that brings us to fun factor. The destruction and the shooting just work, and when you're terrassing across a low-gravity Mars landscape, you're smashing through explosive barrels and solar panels, and the world's exploding around you. That is incredible fun. But the infinite enemies are atrocious, and their habit of spawning directly behind you without any warning, and obviously without any apparent means of travel other than a Star Trek teleporter. The older gameplay conceit does hurt it in those elements. Multiplayer is excellent, and of course, I always love the ability to return to a game and perform any missions you didn't get to do if you beat the main story. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating scale, with rent being replaced by deep sale for PC. This is an incredibly odd pricing scheme. If you have it for Steam already, you get this version for free, so have at it. And most likely that means you can leap into this with that learned memory of what the original game offered. But if you're a newcomer, there's a lot of ancient gameplay design here that really does show that remasters aren't always the best idea overall. More so than many other remasters, I can't say it's a great thing despite its half price, which of course is always nice. So for me, if you don't own the game already, this is a wait for a sale. There's no denying that the destruction system is second to none, and that makes the cut here, and it does a phenomenal job really rubbing your adrenal gland, but it's held back by a number of factors that at the very least require a bit of forethought before leaping into this, especially if you're new. So that's it for me. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Maybe check out Reddit or Twitter. And as always, you can become a patron for the Patreon website. You can jump into our Discord. We have an absolutely fantastic community, thanks to all of them. We have a good place for people to come and discuss video games, discuss just various things. It is a fantastic place to be, and it always helps me give you guys reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.